So Mandy, I've gone ahead and muted everyone. Welcome everyone. We're still getting everyone in from the waiting room to our webinar today. Awesome. Okay, great. We've got a good group. Still more people coming in. I'll keep an eye on that, but wanted to get started right away and welcome everyone to the webinar today. This is myself. I'm Abbey Smith. And this is Mandy Magill, our amazing presenter today, and we're going to talk about how to talk to everyone about regenerative agriculture without confusing people. And I met Mandy a couple weeks ago. We were introduced by a mutual friend, Chris Taylor from Lemon Juices, and he said, "You guys have to meet. I know you'll have so much to talk about." And it turns out we definitely did have a lot to talk about. And I was so impressed with Mandy's ability to talk about regenerative agriculture in a way that's so understandable and so exciting. And I was telling her that myself and my husband and other people that are deeply involved in this work, we sometimes are asked these really simple questions and we get the deer in the headlight looks like, I don't know how to answer that question. And it seems, because there's so many different ways you could answer it, and we're just so deep in it that we lose the ability to just speak about this in a way that's accessible. So Mandy's going to help all of us with that today. So thank you so much, Mandy. I'm going to turn it right over to you. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and then my role will be to manage questions and conversation. So there's a couple points where Mandy will allow for questions. Please type any of your thoughts at any time into the chat window, and I will be watching for them there. So Mandy, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Abby. Thank you so much for having me here. I'm super excited to get to share this and help. Like Abby mentioned, there's so many pieces. So it's like, how do we pull this together in like a concise story so that we can all figure it out and actually communicate it. And I was going to kind of do this as a lecture PowerPoint kind of situation. And I thought, you know, a big piece of this whole aspect of regeneration is storytelling that we've so largely lost in our current society. So I wanted to bring back in storytelling. And so, as Abby mentioned, I'm going to stop in a couple of spots because I want everyone to see how I'm putting this together. Because it's about kind of breaking down these different chunks so that we can look at the big picture at the end of it and pull them all together. And so, you know, the way this is broken down, I actually have used, and a lot of you are actually going to recognize a lot of Alan Savory's work. I've been listening to his book on Audibles, and I have the physical version, which actually is signed too. I found it at the Boulder Bookstore, which was exciting. But anyway, that's been a huge piece for me because I've been learning so much about regenerative agriculture and all of the different aspects of it and getting really excited. But then it was like trying to come up with this bigger picture, and I've been kind of pulling on this thread of like, how can we find what this root, like where did this really start? And I went back to like World War II, when we really went into industrial agriculture and we used wartime chemicals as peacetime food production. And it was the get big or get out mantra, the plant fence row to fence row to really up yield and efficiency, which was done for a good reason, but we just didn't know these unintended consequences that were going to happen. And so I thought, but that's not really where it starts. And so then I went back to the Industrial Revolution, where we really saw the industrialization of society and the mechanization of society. And I thought, well, that's still not really it. And so I went back to the first agricultural revolution, and that's 12,000 years ago. And I'm like, okay, this has to be it. And it still didn't feel right. And so more recently, coming across Alan's work again and some of his more recent podcasts I've listened to, I was like, oh my God, this is it. And so now I've gone back to 2.5 million years ago because it's really thinking about when did early humans start interacting with the environment that was more taking it from a system of complexity down to what a goal would be. So like when we first started using tools, sticks and stones and things like that, and it started reducing the system of complexity into simplicity based on a goal that we were moving towards. So this is really about a paradigm shift as how we think in society. So I ask people to really set aside like how we are currently operating in our society and put that over here so that, and like the way life works, just set that over here and let's just open up to a new way of thinking. And I love to start with a quote by Albert Einstein, that we cannot solve problems by using the same thinking that we used when we created them. We all know that quote well, and I think it really encapsulates where we are at with this regenerative movement. So like I said, I went way back to find that root cause, and so it's that reductive thinking and reductive mindset that, you know, we didn't see that way back then, but as more and more things have happened with technology and industrialization, we've really started to see this siloing and segmenting of how we work and how we treat land and how we treat our bodies, with things like Western medicine. Not that Western medicine isn't important, because it is for emergencies, we need it. But when we're talking about chronic illness, we are the most chronically ill nation on the planet. And we're in that mode of, like, you know, you have a heart problem and you take a medication. Well, that might cause 5 other side effects that you have to take more medications for. So it's, and this is in Alan's wording, it's things that we make are complicated, like a car. So if it breaks, you can fix it and it runs again. But things that are complex, like these interrelated living systems, these self-organizing biological systems, they're so interrelated with other aspects that you pull on one thing and everything else moves, whether you realize it or not. So, and another aspect, when we're looking at the industrialization of agriculture, a really excellent way to see how we have split things up is looking at taking cows off of pastures, which is what they're supposed to be eating. They're ruminant animals that graze on grass, and we put them in concentrated animal feeding operations to maximize efficiency and all that kind of stuff. And so we've separated them from their environments, what they eat, and also what the land is needing in relation to them. And so we see that separation aspect. So again, complex living self-organizing system based in biology that we're treating like a machine. And we see this with like pills and pesticides and surgeries and tilling. We're very much treating like the human body the same way we're treating nature and the land right now. So that's kind of the first segment. As Abby said, I want to do some little stops here and there, maybe take 1 or 2 questions if we have any thoughts or ideas, because the way I'm breaking this down is to kind of set that on the shelf once we've decided that we're good with that. So I just want to stop for a second. Are there any thoughts on that little segment?
And just a reminder, if you have questions, I've muted everyone so that we have no background noise and we can hear Mandy's voice beautifully. If you have any questions on at this point or in general, please just drop them into the chat window, and that's on your screen there if you're on a computer. And I'll just write a little message here so you could see the orange blinking light. That would be the place that you type in questions. So,
and there might not be any at this point. Yeah. That's just the first spot that I stopped. So are we moving on?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So I like to put that on the shelf because we're going to come back to this reductive thinking and mindset idea. And the next segment I talk about is I go into photosynthesis, and I give just a 1-sentence explanation of what that is. And it is sunlight and carbon dioxide being transformed through green growing plants through photosynthesis into carbohydrates and sugars that they feed to all the life underground as well. So they keep some for themselves, but photosynthesis is why all terrestrial life is fed and most aquatic life. And so there's something called root exudates. And so it's actually dripping these carbohydrates and sugars, this beautiful underground network of microorganisms and bacteria. And we have something called mycorrhizal fungi. So it's fungus that attaches itself to the root systems of trees and plants and shrubs. And it forms this network, much like our nervous system. It's communicating, we're seeing transfer of nutrients and water, all these different aspects that are coming together. And we've only, in the past probably 10 to 15 years, really started to unearth the idea of our own microbiomes. And that's really how we connect this when we're trying to think of like an individual aspect. Our microbiome, when it is diverse and healthy and full of like a diversity of bugs, bacteria, microbes, that are helping us to maintain a healthy immune system. For example, we are 10 times bacteria versus human cells, which is pretty amazing. And that's the same thing as the soil. In a handful of healthy soil, we have more microorganisms than there are people on the planet. And that's just in a handful. So it's connecting like our individual body with the microbiome of the planet, which is healthy living soil. So I honestly see the planet as a body, just one body, and it's got this amazing microbiome, which we've really been interrupting, especially in more recent years. And so this is the liquid carbon pathway, and what's amazing when you have all these functioning, amazing green growing plants covering the land, we have amazing carbon sequestration abilities. So you have carbon being drawn down from the atmosphere and being sequestered deep underground, especially in things like the native grassland prairies of the world, which we are largely losing at an insane rate and have been. But some of those plants have, or grasses have like 15-foot taproots, and the carbon gets sequestered beautifully in the soil and can stay there for millennia. So we have this amazing technology already available on the planet, photosynthesis, and it does this amazing job, along with all of the living organisms. So we're losing 75 billion tons of topsoil per year mostly from agricultural lands, and a lot of it is just they don't have green growing plants on them year round to keep all of that soil biology connected, because you're creating all this amazing connection with the fungus and bacteria and the soil aggregates that are happening, and all of that is lost when you till. And so we're just losing all of this topsoil that is so precious to life. Our carbon cycle is out of balance. And what we have to think about with these cycles on Earth, because everything is a cycle in how the Earth operates. And so carbon, it's not like it's not supposed to be in the atmosphere. It is, just not at this level. And there are two big reasons why the carbon cycle is so out of balance right now. On one side is we're drawing concentrated carbon. Really, it's ancient sunlight when you think about the way that photosynthesis operates, which is kind of mind-blowing. But we're drawing this concentrated carbon out of the earth in fossil fuels, and it's just getting diffusely spread among the atmosphere, and that's difficult to bring back down when we have also broken its return path. So that's a really interesting thing to think about, is we have a lot going out, and as we've done these more industrial actions on the land, with industrial agricultural practices, especially tilling, and the planting of monocrops and everything that goes with that. Monocrops are thousands of acres of the same crop. And then we're breaking that pathway for it to come back down. We're also deforesting at an incredible rate. So we're breaking a lot of those natural balancing systems that happen on the planet. And so we have an abundance of carbon in the atmosphere not able to return the way it normally would. And so something that kind of takes people by surprise is fossil fuels are not causing climate change. They can't, because they are a resource, a very precious resource, ultimately, that we might need in the future. But that's something that so many people talk about, is fossil fuels. And it's like, yes, we do need to go to renewable resources for sure, but that fossil fuel aspect is not what's causing climate change. It's our management of those fossil fuels as a resource. So that goes back to our reductive thinking. So I like to point out that photosynthetic process and the carbon cycle aspect to really get our heads around that. And that's my next segment that I stop at. And Abby, I don't have to actually stop here if nobody has any questions. It's more so people can see how this is broken down.
Yeah, no, this is great. This is really great. I'm not seeing any questions come in. I think it's because it's really
hopefully everybody's flowing with the story, because this is just so fun to piece these things together.
It really is. Yeah, I absolutely. And so this is how you would speak as if you were talking to a room full of people, let's say at a coffee shop in LA, or at your friend's house in LA, where people are not connected to the earth, or they do not have a background in agriculture. And I guess my question at this moment is, you've gone through reductive thinking, you talk about the carbon cycle, photosynthesis, they're very disconnected, but what I love is this little method you have of saying, okay, put that on the shelf and just pause and then come back to it. I think that's so effective, and we don't do that. We try and link it all together, and yes. People are like, whoa, I can't do that. But if we say, okay, wait, just set that over there.
Right, exactly, yeah. And yeah. That's where we're at. What's up?
Oh yeah, and so I'm just wondering, they at this point, are they with you? Are if we were, instead of 35 people in different rooms around the world, if we were all sitting together at a coffee shop in LA and we didn't have any connection to the land really, or we just wanted to know more, are people with you at this point? Are you what's their reaction, I guess? Like where
people are really getting excited at this point because they're starting to put together this story. And that's, like you said, that's why I do that, because it's almost like, it seems counterintuitive to break it into parts, since when we think of holistic context, we're really trying to pull everything together. But I think it really helps us to break down these individual pieces so that when I get to this bringing it all together point in the talk, all of this makes sense. And I think I saw somebody mention something about a graphic. I do have one of those, which I can bring up at the end. I'll make a note. It's from Joyce Farms, and it's an amazing graphic that shows this. I just don't have it immediately pulled up on my computer. So if it's okay, I'm going to wait until we get to that point.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So yes, that one's on the shelf now. So we have reductive thinking, and we have photosynthesis and carbon cycle. We're putting both of those on the shelf. And this next segment that I move into is talking about ruminants, and the reason kind of why we're seeing some of these broken aspects of these ecosystems. So ruminants are grazing animals like cows, elk, bison, and they have this amazing special relationship with the earth. They co-evolved with the earth, especially grasslands, which are the more seasonal rainfall areas of the earth. And it's this natural relationship that's been broken. And something that's very interesting that I learned from Alan Savory is there used to be over 50 species of large grazing animals that covered North America forever ago. And they moved in huge, large herds. I mean, like mind-blowing numbers, like in the millions, and moved across the land in this really amazing way. And I'll talk about how they regenerate here in a little bit. But that's something for us to think about as we're thinking about production potential of the land through regenerative agriculture and holistic management. We don't really know what those limits are at all, because what it used to be able to do is just insane. So we're seeing desertification in more brittle environments. So these more arid environments where you don't have humidity year round. You're seeing aspects of how we have treated the land, either how we've moved animals, even before the first agricultural revolution. Some of this was going on then too, because nomadic sheep herders and such were moving animals in a way that they were thinking was the right way, not necessarily what would have happened if it was a more natural situation with like pack hunting predators, keeping those animals moving the way that they would because of that threat. And most deserts aren't normal. That's what's also mind-blowing with how much we think of deserts as being like a natural ecosystem, which there are true deserts, but so many deserts that we have now are not normal. They've desertified because of these broken relationships with ecosystems. So what we don't realize is not only do ruminants need grasses, because that's what they eat and that's what they digest, they have that special rumen, that special part of their four-chambered stomach, where it's a whole system of bacteria in that first chamber of the stomach, and that's where we see chewing the cud and the whole the ruminating aspect, where they're taking in plant material and they're able to break down the cellulose and plant cell walls to gain nutrition from that, and that's something we can't do. So they have this special digestive system that allows them to gain nutrition from the lands. So again, this is a really controversial question. And as Abbey mentioned, like I did this talk out in LA with a room full of people, and I know I have vegans there. I know I have people who ate meat, kind of all over the board. And I said, right now there's such a controversy about cows causing climate change. And I'm like, but are they really? No, it's the same thing as fossil fuels. They can't, it's not possible. One, they co-evolved with the earth and they have this amazing relationship that used to work. But the other aspect of it is they are like, they're a resource if we think of them in that way. And so the way that we're managing them right now, which is based on that more reductive way of thinking, is what has broken that as we've taken ruminants off of the land and as we've expanded in population too. So that's another big thing for people to realize. It's like, oh my gosh, like cows aren't causing climate change. It's our management, therefore our thinking, our reductive thinking that's doing that. So that's my next segment that I want to put on the shelf, and we're almost done with this shelf idea. I'm getting ready to bring it all together, but Abbey, is there anything I can answer with that?
I'm selfishly stealing all the questions, but I feel like there aren't any questions at this point unless someone wants to type those in. But I think that makes sense, because I don't know everyone on this list, but I know quite a few, and there's some longtime holistic managers here and people that are in the ag community, which is great. So I think that they're probably like with you on that part.
Makes me nervous too.
No, it's good. They could, I'm sure they'll be super supportive and helpful and everything. So for me, this would probably be the hardest segment that sits on the shelf to take in because of our just public perception of livestock. Like we're just inundated with these messages about meat being bad for you and livestock are horrible for the planet. And it's even put in like museums. And I think I saw it at a, like the Natural History Museum in San Francisco. Like it's in these places that you're not going to question that livestock is inherently bad for the environment. So I'm curious, and it's just so exciting to have you saying these things and hearing that. How are people responding now? Are they with you still, or is it kind of like, oh, I don't know?
No, still with me because, like I said at the beginning, I very specifically say everything that you currently think, which are ultimately like our ideas and opinions. I'm like, and just the way that we've known society operating for so long, it's like, just put that away. Not on the shelf. We don't want it on the shelf. Put it over here, where it's like we don't even realize we live in these preconceived notions because that's our reality. And so setting it up that way has really been helpful because I kind of lead people into this realizing like this is going to be like something really different that we're talking about. It's a whole different way to look at how life really works because we are so incredibly disconnected from the land currently and from each other, from nature, from how our food is produced, all of that, to the point where most people don't even realize how vulnerable they are in terms of lack of food security. It's like we have a globalized food system now, and I don't think people realize like just because it's at the grocery store doesn't mean that that's going to always be there, you know. So it's an aspect of people like really letting those guards down because yeah, you do see people wanting to argue about that, but in this realm, and actually the company I was speaking for is vegan, and so that was really interesting because it's like through this way of storytelling, that's I think what allows us to kind of like, it's not a defensive reaction, it's more of a it pulls you in, it's more of an emotional like different level that you get pulled in on from this idea of a story that it's like, let's talk about 2.5 million years ago and how did we get here, you know. So and I do address a couple of the things that you were asking about specifically in just a little bit, so hopefully that's a good answer for right now.
Yeah, it's great. It's fantastic. Thank you, Mandy. My friend Kathy has asked a question. Kathy I actually unmuted her so that she could speak because she wanted to know if there's notes. She's trying to get all the livestock info down because she talks with a lot of vegans, she says. And Kathy, you can explain more, but she works as the educational director for the Tomcat Ranch Educational Foundation. So she's
awesome.
Yeah.
I'm meeting with Kevin Watt this Friday.
We love Kevin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I will. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say you're saying such wonderful things and you're talking so fast, but I don't take notes so slow. And I'm like, oh my God, I have to talk to this woman next week. She's a professor at Harvard. They sent me this whole proposal how she wants to remove livestock. And so I have all these notes taped on it. And when you're talking, I'm like, oh, she's saying perfect things that I should be saying. And I can't get it all down. So do you have any notes or anything I can? Thank you.
Yes. Yeah. So I actually have written out, funny enough, I had a 14-page outline. And I broke it down to like 2.5 pages. So I didn't completely, I mean, there's so much to this because you can expand in so many areas, but I really want the specific content to be that focus. But yes, we're actually, with my organization, Tribe Green Rising, we're working on coursework that we're going to be putting together. So it's like a 4 to 6 week thing so we can start getting this out there more. But also Abby's recording this, so that's something that can be shared around as well. And then I can also send you, she put my email address, I think, on the Zoom info. So you can email me and I can send you the outline. Because that's the point, is to get this out there in a way that people can actually connect with, as opposed to all of these like crazy ideas that are all over the place and don't really feel like they have a common core. So,
right. And that's very impressive to condense that down, because I know how hard it is And I did just, because I there's no link for the graphic that my partner Bill did, but I sent the PDF to you, Abby, because I figured maybe you can figure it out. But
Yeah.
we did have Point Blue Conservation Science review it to make sure we were accurate.
Awesome. And I'll include that with the recording and send it out to everyone. So awesome. Thank you. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank
Back
you.
to you. Yes. Thanks, Mandy. Thanks, Kathy.
Thank you.
Okay, so now how we've gotten to this whole shelf idea with all the three ideas. So we have reductive thinking, photosynthesis and carbon cycle, and ruminants. And now I want to bring it all together. So, and the thing is, there are many ways to regenerate land. It doesn't have to involve animals. It's just that animals are so incredibly powerful. But that's something I want people to understand, because we have to, and many people obviously in the regenerative ag world and holistic management world, we understand that there's an aspect of keeping integrity to this movement, because it's very easy, especially in our reductive way of thinking, to be like, oh, we need a list of best practices. And it's like, that's exactly how we're going to end up in the same mess that we're currently in with organic and with sustainable. It's like, we can't go down that route again. And I'm hoping that some of you are nodding your heads on that, because that's a big piece for me, because I feel like I'm starting to see even the industrialization and reductive aspect of regeneration, regenerative ag happening. And that's why, and I'll talk about this, but that holistic context, dropping below all of these like lists of practices or ideas or opinions and coming down to a lower foundation where we're all on common ground. And that's the point of this talk. So as I move through that, and again, I just want to focus on the ruminant aspect, because that's so powerful and such a massive piece to this. And so the part that I explain with that, in terms of getting the public to wrap their heads around, well, how can we mimic the way large herds used to move in the past, and apply that same kind of predator pressure that kept them moving in the way that regenerated land. And the thing about ruminants that's so amazing is the way that their hooves break the soil crust. This is not like our version of tilling that shreds the land. This is their hooves breaking the soil crust as they go, which allows water infiltration. It also presses seeds into the ground. They fertilize with their urine and feces as they move as well. And the way their mouths tear at the grasses, it actually spurs growth below and above ground. So it's this amazing symphony that's happening along with the whole microorganism foundation under the ground that's doing all this fantastic work that we're not always thinking of or ever. So the way that that's happening in regenerative ag practices is using electric fencing to provide that pack hunting predator pressure on herds, and then they're moving them through paddocks. And so it's not the amount of animals on land, it's the amount of time. And so I think it's interesting to think about one cow on 1,000 acres could do more damage than 1,000 cows on 1 acre based on time. And so you see, and this is coming from a holistic context, which I'll talk about that here in a little bit. But when farmers and ranchers are planning how to regenerate their land with these amazing animals, they're taking into account everything, in where the water is on that land, all those kinds of things. You also don't need irrigation, and I'll speak about that in a minute. And so it's thinking about all these different pieces and how they interplay and how they need to move so that they are regenerating land as they go. And so by the time they come back to that paddock, as they move them through these electric fencing paddocks, it's just this insane burst of growth. We also see more diversity of grass as well. And I think that's something I talk about in a little bit here as well. So we're rebalancing the carbon cycle along with the small water cycle and bringing back photosynthesis across all of the land as well. So when you're looking at the carbon cycle, that liquid carbon pathway and carbon being sequestered deep underground, we're rebalancing that. So we're able to sequester tons of carbon, which I'll talk about that in a second. And then I don't think people realize with our hydrologic cycles, right now we're seeing the more violent big water cycle, like ocean to land. And that's a really, it's becoming more violent because we've lost so much of these other balances. And one of them is the small water cycle. And you really don't see it anymore. I kind of remember as a kid, I felt like I saw it more, but it's local weather that's happening because of water that's held in the land. And transpiring, and like this whole small water cycle and like small rain showers that happen. And so we're also rebalancing the water cycle. We're bringing back more photosynthesis because you have you're putting more solar panels on the land that are just covering, and that's how it should be. That's what the earth wants to do. So we're restoring biodiversity above and below ground. This is a really interesting statistic. For every 1% of organic matter in soil per acre, that soil is able to hold 25,000 gallons more of water approximately. So, and we have some regenerative practices or regenerative farms that are at like between 5 and 8%. So think about that multiplied, 25,000 gallons per acre for 1%. And you have some that are up to like 6, 7, 8% of organic matter on their land. They're building soil. I mean, it's amazing. So I want to bring up, also and this is a really key point, it's drought, flood, and fire resistance. As we have more water that's able to stay in the land, this is an amazing source of water that we've lost because of these industrial practices. You have drought, flood, and fire resistance, which obviously we're seeing a lot of that right now. So we're rebalancing that as well. I was recently at White Oak Pastures in Bluffton, Georgia, and got to hang out with Will Harris for like 3.5 hours. It was so much fun. He drove me and my husband around in his Jeep, and we just went all over the place. It was amazing. And he was getting ready to go teach some of the Whole Foods people in Austin about regenerative agriculture. And he was sharing with me the study that was just done, which I'm sure a lot of you know about. This was like early last year that this came out. So this was a study on White Oak Pastures, looking at the whole life cycle analysis of that land, and what, if it was really true, how much carbon is being sequestered. And this is a graph, if you can see this. So it's the whole life cycle analysis of that farm showing everything, and it ends up at a negative 3.5%. So that out of everything that's happening, and this is including the cows, the slaughter, transportation, all of that, it's actually a carbon sink. It is negative 3.5% per pound of beef. And what I really love is this one. You can't see this one as well. It's this little graph right here. And it shows we have conventional beef, we have pork, chicken, all conventional. We have Beyond Burger, Impossible Burger, and soybeans. All of those are a positive carbon emitter. They are emitting carbon along with all of these other issues that are coming from these industrial practices. And then we have White Oak Pastures over here at negative 3.5%. And I heard Will on a podcast a few months ago say, when people talk about Impossible Burger, I'm like, well, that's a plus 3.5%. So you'd have to eat 3.5 pounds of my beef to break even on your damage to the environment. And that's not even considering health impacts for the body. So I love that, because that is such a key aspect to realize. So as we go through that, so that's the study at White Oak Pastures that I think it just really shows, like, finally we can get through like the soil testing that's starting to happen through Savory Institute. They're doing the EOV seal, the Ecological Outcome Verified seal, land to market program. So we're starting to see these soil testing things happen on land that can actually show that the practices are happening on that land in a regenerative, holistic way, because you're seeing more organic matter in that land, more carbon sequestered when they do these soil tests. So what's cool about that is it can't be loopholed. We can't do this best practices thing. It's like you're seeing whether or not it's happening, whether or not those practices are happening. And here's another thing I want to show. Marcus McCulley up in Boulder in Colorado, McCulley Family Farms, he actually allowed me to share this with you all. Abby, I'm going to share my screen.
Yeah, please do.
Here we go. So this is a picture of him. He spoke at one of my events. Hold on. Recently, and brought this, and this was just mind-blowing for people. So this is him standing out. Okay, so this is not his land. This is Boulder County open space that shares a fence line with his land. And this is him standing on that land. I mean, Boulder also gets a ton of wind, and so much of that soil has been lost. And here is the really mind-blowing picture. This is his fence line, and that is the amount of soil that has been lost. I mean, what is that, like 2.5, 3 feet that we lost? And so that's the thing, especially in these arid environments, these seasonal rainfall areas that don't have humidity year-round. We're seeing, things like national parks and open space that we're trying to preserve and protect, but you can't put those on a shelf and take them away from the natural functionings of those ecosystems and have it be okay. It's not. It's separated from part of its life source. And so, I mean, that's amazing. And then what's really cool is Boulder County is starting to work with Marcus to regenerate that land. So this is the next picture. I think this was the following year. He did keyline plowing on this land. This is the same picture of the dirt and gravel that you saw 2 pictures ago. And this is, so he did keyline plowing, which is a form of plowing that digs lines. It's not like tilling. It's like very specific kind of a way to contour with the land so that you end up with water infiltration. It's basically a way to bring land back to life. He planted annuals instead of perennials, obviously, because there's no soil base there. So he's trying to establish biodiversity and soil diversity in that land so that they can start holding perennials in the future. But I mean, that happened in like 1 year. It's just amazing how fast land can regenerate, because ultimately that our bodies and land want to regenerate. We've just been interrupting that process for a long time. Okay, I'm gonna stop the share. Okay. And I also like to talk about the fact that we don't have nutrient density in food. And it's also toxic when we're doing these industrial practices, because ultimately, and this is kind of weird to say, but in industrial agricultural practices, for example, like thousands of acres of corn or soybeans, you kind of have to spray pesticides in that situation because there is no immune system coming from that biodiversity of life that's happening in the soil, because we've destroyed that with tilling, with monocrops. Again, we don't see monocrops in nature. We're spraying pesticides. You don't have the ruminants on the land. We're lacking diversity even in the crop itself. So it doesn't have that immune system. So you actually have to spray in those situations. And what's interesting with regenerative is you can't spray with regenerative practices because you would actually destroy the production potential of that land. So that's a huge bridging of that gap. So we're seeing, food right now, again, we're the most chronically ill nation in the world. And we're seeing one of my favorite articles is light farming, restoring carbon, organic nitrogen, and biodiversity to agricultural soils by Dr. Christine Jones. She's the founder of Amazing Carbon. And in here, she shows mineral depletion in veggies, in meats. There's studies that show this stuff. And so, yeah, even obviously us eating plants from the land, cows, if they're actually able to eat grass from the land and everything, they're not getting the kind of nutrition we would have been even 70 years ago. We've lost so much of that just through depleting the health of the soil. And there's a couple of things, but I'm going to go a little bit faster because I know I'm kind of taking too long. Diversity is strength, and that's what we want to get back as we're practicing regeneratively. We start to rebuild all of that health and diversity of life. Takes the burden off of oceans too, and this is something I should have mentioned earlier. The oceans are absorbing tons of carbon because they're a 3D version of the land. They have amazing carbon sequestration potential and ability, and they've really been taking the brunt of this for so long that's why now we're seeing the oceans hitting massive tipping points, because when carbon dioxide absorbs into the ocean, it becomes carbonic acid. And that is where we're seeing shell-growing animals not able to grow shells. We're seeing the warming of the oceans. We're seeing coral reefs bleaching and dying. I mean, these are entire ecosystems. This would be like losing like the Amazon rainforest when we lose something like the Great Barrier Reef. I mean, these are huge issues that we know are happening. And what I want people to understand is as we start getting back into this more regenerative and into this holistic way of thinking, which I'll talk about in a second, all those things are going to come back online because we're going to start rebalancing everything. And this is from Alan Savory, if we reverse desertification on half of the world's grasslands, we would take carbon levels in the atmosphere back to pre-industrial levels. That's pre-1850. So right now we're hovering around like 415-ish parts per million. And that would be at the like 280 level in those pre-industrial times in like mid-1800s and before. And so again, it's not that we shouldn't have carbon in the atmosphere, we just have too much. And we have this amazing potential to sequester tons of carbon in the land when we do these regenerative things. So we're looking at the root cause. And this is, again, going back as we're looking at these things on the shelf. We have ruminants, we have the photosynthesis carbon cycle, and then we have the reductive thinking. So it's like, if we're trying to get back to how do we fix that core aspect of why we have so many of these problems that we've been trying to band-aid for so long, what do we need to do with reductive thinking? We have to flip it. We have to go to expansive, collaborative, holistic ways of managing. And it's like, it's a regenerative way of viewing life. It's a more abundant, positive view that also creates all these other amazing things. We've never done this before in the history of humans. This is why this is a massive paradigm shift. We've never done this. We've been in this reductive framework for so long, we don't even know it. And so when we try this, it's gonna work. That's what's so cool. It's like not even a question. And so it's that holistic context and framework. And what I love about, well, and this is necessary with Alan's framework here, he has questions that like a whole group of people, like the people making decisions about land or about a business or about anything, because it can be applied to anything. When you send an idea through that framework, it allows the group to learn whether or not this is a good idea, whether or not we should do this. So it's really cool because it takes us from this upper level of like arguing about ideas or opinions or whatever, and it takes us down to this level here where you might think we should do it this way, I might think we should do it this way. Let's send it through the framework and see. And it's just, it's amazing because then we're getting away from that divisive aspect that we are so steeped in right now. And that's what makes it also simple. It's like, yeah, it sounds funny to say that this is simple, but it is, because nature and our bodies want to regenerate. That is actually their natural way of being. We've just continually interrupted this, and it's just been getting worse and worse. So when you look at a regenerative mindset, you then can have informed decisions, which creates management and actions that are in that more positive, holistic framework, which equals positive outcomes, and that reinforces that mindset. So it's this amazing cycle that we can create this regenerative, even in our own minds, based on the kinds of decisions that we're making from this more regenerative way of viewing things. And then that's all reinforced just by the fact that, whoa, we're seeing massive amounts of abundance through these regenerative, holistically managed lands, and we're seeing production we didn't even know was possible. And now we're seeing carbon come down. I mean, I just imagine, like, because this can happen so fast, in like 5 years, that we can see the carbons like dropping under 400, maybe it's hitting like mid 300s again. I mean, just think about how amazing that's going to be. And I have no doubt this is going to happen. Personally, I'm telling people by 2030, I see carbon levels down to the pre-industrial levels again. We can do it, like it can happen that fast. So it's seen that, you know, ruminants, when they're disconnected from the land, both are suffering. It's not just the land, it's not just ruminants. They need each other because it's this partnership that's been broken. It's like long lost lovers. And so it's interesting because when I drive through areas where I see these amazing landscapes that should be covered with ruminants, they're not. And it makes me sad because it's like the land needs them and they need the land. And I don't think people realize that because of our level of disconnection. But I also connect this to people. You know, when we look at the Industrial Revolution and the mechanization of society, so that's 200 plus years ago, we are really seeing a lack of people wanting to be involved and excited about things because we're in this more mechanized way of working, and we're disconnected from purpose and from each other and from nature. So the same way that land has a dormant seed bank, I mean, we're seeing grasses come back that we thought were gone, that have been dormant for like 70 plus years, waiting for the right conditions, the right mindset to manage that land and to have this abundance come back. And we're seeing diversity come back and these so thought, you know, extinct species. Same thing with people. I feel like this whole idea of regenerative is going to expand beyond just how we are treating the land. It's going to go into how we educate. It's going to go into how we work, how we operate with each other. And it's going to become a whole different thing because as everything is connected with these living systems, you can't have a regenerative agricultural system and everything just amazing there and not have that same impact throughout everything, throughout society and throughout our beings as people. So when we heal the planet, we heal ourselves. And it's just this amazing thing that we can do together. I want to just do 2 other quick things and then we can talk about questions. The 4 most proposed ideas and solutions to climate change. I like to go over these because they're, and I've heard Alan Savory talk a lot about this. So renewable resources, we have to go to renewable resources. Well, of course we do, we need to do that, but it's not gonna reverse climate change. It's basically gonna stop what's happening and might affect it a bit, but it's not gonna be what we need. So yes, renewables need to happen. It's also a massive infrastructure change that we're gonna have to go through, and that's gonna take some time. So while we're going through this transition of our infrastructure with fossil fuels and everything, let's be doing regenerative things with food and products and services. Let's plant a ton of trees. That's another one. Well, when you look at a holistic context, this framework, that may or may not make sense based on that soil, that climate, those people, that whole situation. And so Alan Savory has an example of like tons of trees being planted in a desert, and it's like it didn't work because there was no other interaction from that ecosystem to support that. So it's just, again, we're band-aiding. This is a good one, and Abby, I think this will kind of go back to one of your questions. Go vegan, remove animals from the land. I had a conversation with I will call her a hardcore vegan, because one of my friends was like, I can't wait for you to talk to her because of the way you explain this. And I went through this whole thing. And at the end of it, I kid you not, she was not only blown away, but she was like, you know, if I knew where to get that meat, I would eat meat again. And I was like, I totally get it. Like that's how I was. I actually went vegan because I didn't want to have this terrible impact on the planet. I did that back in 2015. I didn't do well. So I started thinking, well, how can I feel good about eating meat again then? I needed to know my farmer. So I went down the local food path, and then through that, I found regenerative agriculture, and it was just like, oh, well, this is it. Like, this is amazing. And it's just going to rebalance everything, including our own health. So it's not, and when I talk to vegans about this, I'm like, it's not that you have to eat meat. That's not the question. Again, that's talking about an opinion or whatever, or what's right for your body. You should eat what's right for your body. And if you're vegan and that's how you want to stay, great. But get your vegan food from regenerative systems, because it's going to be healthier for you because there's actually nutrient density in that. And you're regenerating the planet. I mean, one of the things that a lot of vegans don't understand because of our disconnection, industrial harvesting of an industrial crop, millions of animals die. I mean, we're killing pollinators, we're killing birds, and just in the harvesting, we're killing all of the animals that are in the way. And it's this horrible thing that they don't even realize is happening because of that disconnection. And so when they connect that and they realize, okay, I can still be vegan if I want to be, but I would also be like part of this amazing regenerative system where I'm gaining health through this food, and I'm regenerating the planet, and we're not, laying waste to all of these animals that people aren't even realizing are getting killed just in the harvesting and the way that's done. And again, I do want to mention industrial agriculture is not about blaming anyone. It's just how things have gone because we thought we were progressing, and it was with good intentions. We just didn't know, because we weren't thinking in this bigger context, what those unintended consequences were going to lead to. And now we're seeing all these health and land degeneration aspects. And then the last one of those 4 proposed ideas and solutions is political, institutional, and company change. And the thing is, yes, we do need that. We do need to change like the industrial ag subsidy aspect. We need to help farmers be able to transition to regenerative, but they're not going to change way ahead of public opinion or knowledge. And so really this is a grassroots movement that people have to understand. We need to understand these systems and reconnect with the earth and biology and each other to understand how things actually work so that we can make good decisions even in our own lives. And that will help to move the market as this happens, and then we'll start seeing those policies come into place. So it's going to be kind of one of those stair-stepping things, but it will happen. So for this regenerative transition to enter this regenerative era, like I said, citizens are going to lead this largely. It's like customers deciding that they want regenerative food when they realize that question, like when people understand this, it's no longer a question of expense. It's where do I get that food, and we do have to think in this transition, the socioeconomic stratification that we're currently in. I know I'm throwing some big stuff here at the end, but I do want to address that because we're talking about food justice, we're talking about environmental justice, all these different aspects that are going to be fixed as this happens, but we're going to have to find a way to transition. And kind of 3 ideas I have in that realm are, if you have the financial means, by all means support regenerative farmers and ranchers because they're doing that work. Also grow some of your own food if you have the ability to do that. So that's one spot that we can make a huge impact. I would love to see something like a government program starting to divert money to hiring people to start growing food in cities, like in a community garden, doing regenerative things in the city, rooftop gardens, community plots, all that kind of stuff where people are regaining connection with each other. They're doing something meaningful and purposeful. And they're getting healthy food too. There's actually an example of this in Denver. It's called Revision, and it's a whole community that was a food desert, and they started growing food in their yards, and now they have opened a co-op of their own, and now they're selling this food. So now they are healthier. They've taken control of their food. They have food security now instead of a food desert, and they're selling their food to everybody else who isn't growing their own food. So that's an aspect of this. And then there's also a ton of organizations who are doing work for local healthy food access, so we can support them as well. So it's this idea of how do we bridge this gap as we transition, because you can't just do it overnight. It's like, this is going to take a little bit of time. It's knowledge and awareness, but it's also these practices starting to happen, the market getting that signal so that more, because a lot of farmers actually want to switch to this because they care about the land, they care about what they're doing. And as more of them learn about this, they're like, I want to do that, but I can't make that switch because they're so strapped financially. So this also helps lessen that burden. So it creates this common ground as a global community. We're no longer arguing about these ideas and opinions. And it's a collective purpose. It's a shared path together. And I want to just say a couple of things that we are doing as far as my organization, Tribe Green Rising. We are working on an app. It is, we are hoping to launch later this year, hopefully sooner, but we're working on an app that is going to be by geolocation, finding local food products and services that are regenerative. And I mean authentic regenerative, like that's the system that we need to promote. And so we want to make it easy because obviously through this talk, it's a lot of info. And even when people get it, it's like, I still don't really know what to look for. Well, there are some of us out there who have been researching this and know what to look for, so we can come together and build out this database. It's going to be amazing because that's going to be in the palm of people's hands and they can start making these decisions locally and regeneratively. Oh, I want to mention my earrings. These are from White Oak Pastures. They're regenerative earrings. This is leather. So it's from cows that have been regenerating the land. It's amazing. So we can do this with products. We can do it with services. We can localize and regenerate our rural local economies. You can also book me to speak. This message can apply to anyone, anywhere, because it's reconnecting with our foundation and who we are. And then we can expand that to however it needs to be. And I do want to say with the app launch, if you join our hub, so if you go to tribegreenrising.com and you join, members there right now, it's kind of a social media information site right now. We have a little over 100 members. Our members on there are going to have first access to our app when we launch it. So please go there and join and get an account. We're also starting up Regenerative Revolution hubs. We launched one in the Denver Boulder area. I've had a couple of those happen. We're doing them seasonally so that we get back. It's not quarterly. I'm specifically talking about seasons. So we're doing the last Saturday of January, April, July, and October. And the idea is to have these seasonal gatherings of people where we can come together in our local communities and have these conversations and support each other and have these collaborative conversations. And I want to do it seasonally because I want people to reintegrate with that idea of the energy that comes with seasons, like these different energies. And we're also planning to live stream those as more hubs open up so that we can also see the connection with other local hubs, therefore creating a mycelium network above ground, just like what's below ground. So it's this amazing connection that we can start creating as we all, and there's a lot of this kind of stuff already happening. So I want to join forces so we can really blow this up quickly. And we're also creating coursework, like I mentioned. So I think that is like, it's a ton of info. I know it's a lot to take in, but I'm done.
That's wonderful, Mandy. Thank you so much. Your energy is incredible. I love it, and it's so fascinating for me to see a lot of these ideas that I learned from Alan being so beautifully expressed through you. And I think you did it's just so wonderful. So a couple questions. One is from Leah, who's in Leah Redwood, who's in the Bay Area. Leah says, "So fantastic. Any chance you can have a conversation with I'm going to butcher the name." Salish Rail, you might want to look at the word, but about veganism. I know Alan has had a conversation with him, but from what I saw, he couldn't make the connection between the requirement of the soil for ruminants to rebuild it, or about people needing to eat animals who don't have an industrial food system to go buy food from. So some people don't have a choice, right? I don't know this person, but maybe we could have Leah explain more. But Leah, I unmuted you if you want to talk.
Yeah, I just I saw a video recording of a conversation that Alan was having. These people who are trying to really, push solutions towards the climate issue, and one of the things they were trying to see is the kind of the face-off between the regenerative holistic management and veganism. And it was just fascinating the way it seemed like there were points where they were just like, talking past each other, or, unable to hear. And it just seems like something that if we can find a way to get in collaboration with people who look at the world as vegans do, which I totally admire, and I also feel the same way about animals, but I know that there are people that have no choice on this earth but to eat animals. They would not have adequate nutrition if they didn't. And the really important piece of rebuilding the soil, requiring like millions of ruminants, which you need to have some sort of predator on those millions of ruminants probably, and there aren't enough predators currently besides humans. So just feeling like Salish Rose seemed to be somebody who kind of spoke for the movement in a certain way. So just wondering if we can start having those conversations at a higher level to try and get people on the same page.
Yeah, and that's what I would love to do. I mean, that's my main focus this year is getting out there and getting these talks to happen, because again, I'm really focusing on approaching this from that level that's like, not here's my idea and this is what we have to do. Right. It's more like, let's take it back. Like, we're going to go through this story together. And I do this with individuals too, because it helps like drop that defensive aspect, and we're able to have a conversation, and we realize ultimately we all want the same thing. We're just coming at it from different angles. And yeah, vegans have the right heart. Like, so it actually makes me sad, because I'm like, they're doing it for the reasons that people in Regen are doing it. It's just different ways of looking at the same, trying to fix this kind of thing. So right. Yeah, I mean, if anybody who knows of somebody I should talk to, a place I can go to do this talk, I am going to be applying for a TED Talk probably later this year. As I get this, obviously it can't be this long, so I have to get it really like concise, and that's hard. But yeah, so yeah.
Great.
Awesome. Thank you, Leah. Thank you. We have a couple more questions. Terry Kamek, so she's in Oregon, wants to know, will every state be part of the app?
Yes, our goal is to start building where we know the sources. So like, as we partner with like Jefferson Center, I'm also doing a talk tonight at James Ranch in Durango, Colorado. Those are people who understand regeneration, understand holistic management, and already have their partners. So the idea is to focus on those and build those out, and then expand from there. Because I mean, so many people in this movement already know so many people producing in this way. We just need to connect those dots, and I feel like that's what the app is for. So yes, the goal, actually, I want to go global.
Yay.
That's like ultimately what has to happen. So that's my goal. But right now, let's just take it with, the regional hubs and go national for now.
Awesome. Awesome. And my friend Kathy says, have you reached out to Joaquin Phoenix, who has been pushing his vegan agenda?
I want to talk to Joaquin so badly because I'm like, I love you as a person, but we need to have a conversation. So I actually legitimately am trying to figure out, because I brought on my business coach, who is my chief technical officer now. He was my business coach for 4 years. He lives in Manhattan Beach in LA. So there are a lot of potential connections just from that, just from him being there. And so I'm looking for ways to start talking to different celebrities who have these megaphones that it's like, let's have this conversation. Even if we have a conversation like on video, so that your whole millions of followers can see this conversation happen and understand, oh, we are all on the same page. I just didn't know these parts, So yes.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. Kathy says you're the perfect person to have that conversation. So we're putting you on that. Yeah. Awesome.
I'm ridiculously excited about this. If you can't tell, it's kind of absurd how crazy I get, but
it's infectious. Yeah. It's beautiful. Thank you. We have time for one last question. I know we're a little bit over, but it's from Matthew Allshouse. He says, thanks. This is great, Mandy, Abbey. Looking forward to connecting the dots. Sorry for the long message in advance. By empowering consumers to make a difference in grassland conservation, the Audubon Conservation Ranching program is developing a market-based incentive program that stems the loss of grassland ecosystems, improves the ecological functions of the rangelands by assisting the rancher transition to more regenerative grazing approaches, increasing soil carbon sequestration, helping grassland birds rebound. So that's audubon.org if you want to read more about it. So that was more of a message than a question.
Actually, someone from the Audubon reached out to me a month or two ago because of a rancher in Colorado that connected me, and he was the regional director for ranchers and doing the conservation aspect with the Audubon Society, because they're building out kind of a hub network thing too. So we were talking about what kind of code talks can we do to start spreading this message. So yeah, wonderful. I want to partner with, because the app is going to be local regenerative food products and services, but we're also going to be a flow through for nonprofits and these organizations that are doing this work. Another one is Kiss the Ground. I mean, there's so many doing amazing work, and it's like, that's the information that needs to be found, and more of that network that needs to be tapped into for just the general public. So we also want to be a hub for that as well, so that we can all start connecting on the same page and everybody can start having these conversations, so we can really get this to move quickly.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And move quickly in the right way, like you said, and not with greenwashing or, painting a pretty picture on an industrial model. Exactly. So it's wonderful. And I love the collaborative, inclusive approach, and I feel so aligned on that level. So thank you, Mandy. I think we're out of time. So thank you all so much for joining. Mandy, thank you for sharing your message and your amazing, beautiful energy with us. And we're so excited. Let me just share quickly, almost forgot. Let me share our information with you. So I will be sending out a recording of this webinar, plus things that were mentioned, the carbon cycle document that Kathy sent all of us that was reviewed by Point Blue Conservation Science. And then Mandy, any notes that you have or studies that are digital that you would want to send out to participants? People were requesting that a lot. So I think that this can help.
That's going to be something on our hub and app as well, is connection to resources. If people want to see documentaries, or they want to read an article, or they want to read a book, we're going to have that listed out as well, because that information is so important. But yeah, I have stuff I can send right now too. Yeah,
and just a little collection of things that will be sent out to everyone who registered for the webinar. Yes. So we have Mandy Magill, Mandy at tribegreenrising.com. Did I get it right, Mandy? Yep. And then mine is Abbey at jeffersonhub.com, and you can reach either of us, and we're here to help and stay connected. And yeah, just happy that everyone came today, and so grateful to you, Mandy, for everything you're doing.
Thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity. We'll talk soon.
Okay, bye.
Bye.